The first cry pierced the mountain silence at 3:47 a.m., followed by another, then one more. 4 tiny voices announcing their arrival into a world that seemed determined to test them from their very first breath. In an abandoned logging cabin, 20 miles from the nearest road, Sarah Mitchell had just accomplished what most women couldn't imagine surviving, even in the best of hospitals. She had delivered quadruplets completely alone, with nothing but her own strength, determination, and the flickering light of a dying fire to guide her through the longest night of her life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The blizzard had been building for 3 days, transforming the Colorado Rockies into an unforgiving wilderness of white that swallowed roads, landmarks, and hope with equal hunger. Sarah Mitchell pressed her face against the frost-covered windshield of her ancient Honda Civic, squinting through the swirling snow as she navigated what she hoped was still a road. The GPS had lost signal 2 hours ago, and her cell phone showed the dreaded no service message that had become as familiar as her own reflection. At 7 months pregnant, Sarah should have been home in Denver, surrounded by the comfort of her carefully prepared nursery and the reassurance of her obstetrician's phone number programmed into her speed dial. Instead, she found herself driving through a mountain pass in conditions that would challenge an experienced winter driver, let alone a woman whose belly made it difficult to reach the steering wheel properly. The reason for this dangerous journey lay in the passenger seat beside her, a crumpled letter from the Colorado Department of Social Services informing her that her younger brother Jake had been found dead in his remote cabin near Silverton. Overdose, the official report stated with bureaucratic coldness. No next of kin had been located except for Sarah Mitchell of Denver, who was hereby notified that she had 14 days to claim the deceased's personal effects before they would be disposed of according to state regulations. Jake had been her only family since their parents died in a car accident 5 years earlier. Despite his struggles with addiction, despite the angry words that had passed between them during their last phone call 6 months ago, she couldn't bear the thought of his belongings being thrown away like garbage. So she had loaded her car with emergency supplies, left a note for her landlord about where her rent money could be found if something happened to her, and set out for Silverton to collect whatever remained of her brother's life. The pregnancy had been unplanned, the result of a brief relationship with a man named David Chen, who had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby. The ultrasound at 20 weeks had revealed the stunning news that she was carrying twins, a revelation that had sent her already precarious financial situation spiraling toward disaster. Her job at the downtown library barely covered her current expenses, and the thought of supporting 2 children on her salary seemed impossible. What she didn't know, what wouldn't be discovered until this terrible night in the mountains, was that the ultrasound had missed 2 additional heartbeats hidden behind their siblings. The medical technology at the free clinic where she received her prenatal care was older, less sophisticated than the equipment at expensive private practices. The technician had done her best, but sometimes even the most careful examination couldn't reveal every secret a pregnancy might hold. The Honda's engine began making an ominous rattling sound as Sarah rounded another hairpin curve, the kind of mechanical complaint that spoke of a vehicle pushed beyond its reasonable limits. She had purchased the car used, with high mileage, and a history of previous owners who hadn't been particularly gentle with the machinery. It had served her faithfully for 3 years, but the combination of altitude, cold, and the stress of climbing steep mountain roads was testing every worn component. The heater struggled to combat the cold, seeping through the car's inadequate insulation, and Sarah could see her breath in small puffs, despite the fan running at full speed. She pulled her heavy winter coat tighter around her swollen belly, grateful for the extra layer of warmth, but worried about how much longer the car's systems would continue functioning. When the engine finally gave up, it did so with a shuddering wheeze that left Sarah coasting down a gentle slope in complete silence, except for the howling wind outside. She managed to guide the dead vehicle to the side of what might have been a road, though the snow had obliterated any clear distinction between pavement and forest floor. The silence that followed the engine's death was profound and terrifying. Sarah sat in the rapidly cooling car, watching snow accumulate on the windshield with increasing urgency. The storm showed no signs of abating, and the temperature was dropping fast enough that she could feel the cold creeping through the car's metal frame like icy fingers searching for warmth to steal. She tried her cell phone again, holding it at different angles and moving it around the car's interior in hopes of capturing even one bar of signal. Nothing. The mountains that made this region so beautiful had also created a communications dead zone that stretched for miles, in every direction. Her emergency supplies included a sleeping bag, bottled water, energy bars, and a small camping stove with enough fuel for perhaps 2 days of careful use. She had also packed her brother's spare key, the address of his cabin, and a hand-drawn map that a helpful clerk at the Silverton post office had provided during their phone conversation. But those supplies wouldn't matter if she couldn't find shelter soon. The car was already becoming uncomfortably cold, and she knew that spending the night in a vehicle during a blizzard was often a death sentence. She needed to find real shelter, a place where she could wait out the storm safely. That's when she noticed the break in the tree line, about 50 yards from where the car had died. It wasn't much, just a slight gap in the dense forest that suggested human activity at some point in the past. Sarah gathered her emergency pack, secured her coat as tightly as possible around her pregnant form, and set out into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical force the moment she stepped outside the car's protection, driving snow into her eyes and stealing her breath with its Arctic intensity. Each step through the knee-deep snow required enormous effort, and she found herself stopping frequently to rest and catch her breath. The baby, or babies as she believed, seemed to sense the stress and began moving restlessly, adding internal discomfort to the external challenges she was facing. The gap in the trees led to what had once been a logging road, now overgrown and barely visible under the snow, but still offering easier passage than the untouched forest. Sarah followed it, upward, her legs burning with effort as she climbed the gentle slope. The cold was beginning to affect her judgment, making each decision more difficult and her movements less coordinated. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, she spotted the dark outline of a building through the swirling snow. It was small, clearly abandoned, with a sagging roof and broken windows that spoke of years without maintenance. But it was shelter, and at that moment, shelter meant life. The cabin had been built by loggers sometime in the 1940s, constructed with the kind of solid craftsmanship that had allowed it to survive decades of mountain weather despite complete neglect. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, and snow had drifted through the broken windows to create small piles in the corners, but the roof was mostly intact, and the stone fireplace looked functional if dirty. Sarah pushed through the stuck door and stepped into the cabin's dim interior, immediately feeling relief from the wind's assault. The temperature inside wasn't much warmer than outside, but the absence of wind chill made an enormous difference to her comfort and energy levels. Her first priority was fire. The cabin's previous occupants had left behind a supply of split wood, dry and ready to burn, despite the years of abandonment. Sarah's father had taught her fire-building skills during childhood camping trips, and those lessons now proved invaluable as she arranged kindling and larger pieces in the stone fireplace. The matches in her emergency kit were waterproof, and soon she had a small flame growing among the dry wood. As the fire caught and began to spread, warmth and light filled the cabin's single room, transforming the space from a frightening refuge into something that felt almost cozy. Only then, as she settled onto her sleeping bag near the growing fire, did Sarah allow herself to acknowledge the cramping sensation that had been building in her lower abdomen for the past several hours. She had attributed it to stress, to the physical exertion of the journey and the fight through the snow. But as she sat quietly in the firelight, she realized that the pain was coming in regular intervals, each wave stronger than the last. Labor. At 7 months pregnant, 20 miles from the nearest road, in the middle of a blizzard that showed no signs of stopping. The irony was cruel. She had been planning a careful, controlled delivery at Denver General Hospital with modern medical equipment and skilled professionals to ensure her safety and the baby's health. Instead, she was facing the most challenging experience of her life completely alone, with nothing but her own determination and whatever supplies she could scrounge from an abandoned cabin. As another contraction gripped her body, stronger and more insistent than the previous ones, Sarah Mitchell realized that this night would test every ounce of strength, courage, and resourcefulness she possessed. The babies weren't going to wait for better circumstances or professional help. They were coming now, in this place, and she would have to find a way to bring them safely into the world with nothing but her own hands and the fierce love that had already begun to burn in her heart. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the cabin's rough walls as Sarah prepared to face the longest night of her life. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault on the mountains, but inside, a different kind of miracle was about to begin. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The contractions were coming every 8 minutes now, each one a tidal wave of pain that left Sarah gasping and gripping the rough wooden floor of the cabin. She had managed to create a makeshift birthing area near the fireplace, using her sleeping bag as a base and layering her spare clothes on top to create as clean a surface as possible. The fire provided both warmth and light, but more importantly, it gave her something to focus on during the worst moments. The dancing flames became a meditation point that helped her breathe through each surge of pain. Sarah had read enough pregnancy books to understand the basics of childbirth, but academic knowledge felt woefully inadequate as she faced the reality of delivering alone. She knew that first labors typically lasted 12 to 20 hours, which should have given her time to be rescued or for the storm to clear enough to attempt reaching civilization. But her body seemed determined to prove every statistic wrong. By 11 p.m., the contractions had intensified to every 5 minutes, and Sarah realized with growing alarm that this labor was progressing much faster than normal. The babies weren't supposed to arrive for another 2 months, but premature infants often delivered more quickly than full-term pregnancies. Her twins, as she still believed them to be, were apparently as impatient as they were unexpected. The cabin's single room had become her entire universe. She had explored every corner during the brief respites between contractions, taking inventory of anything that might prove useful. The previous occupants had left behind more than just firewood. There were old newspapers dating back to the 1980s, a rusty knife that she cleaned as best she could with melted snow, some frayed rope, and even a few cans of food that were decades past their expiration dates, but might serve as emergency nutrition if she became desperate. Most importantly, she had found a plastic tarp folded in one corner, relatively clean and large enough to provide a waterproof barrier between her and the wooden floor. She had also located an old metal pot that, after thorough cleaning with snow and boiling water, could serve multiple purposes during the delivery. As midnight approached, Sarah's water broke with a sudden rush that soaked through her makeshift bedding and sent her into a panic of preparation. She knew from her reading that active labor typically began in earnest after this point, and she might have only hours or less before the first baby arrived. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, waves of intensity that seemed to originate in her very core and radiate outward until her entire body felt consumed by the effort of bringing new life into the world. Between contractions, she tried to remain calm and focused, talking to her unborn children in soothing tones that helped settle her own nerves as much as theirs. "We're going to be okay," she whispered into the firelit darkness, her hands pressed against her belly. "I know this isn't the hospital you were supposed to be born in, and I know it's too early, but we're going to take care of each other. Mama's here, and I'm not going anywhere." The first baby announced its imminent arrival with a pressure so intense that Sarah knew she had moved beyond the point of no return. At 2:15 a.m., she felt the overwhelming urge to push, her body taking control of the process with an instinctive knowledge that bypassed conscious thought. There was no time for fear now, only the primitive focus of birth. She had positioned herself as upright as possible, braced against the wall near the fireplace, following the gravity-assisted positions she'd read about in her pregnancy books. The pain was enormous, but it was productive pain, purposeful in a way that gave her strength even as it tested her limits. The first baby emerged at 2:43 a.m., a tiny, perfect girl who immediately began crying with impressive volume for such a small being. Sarah had just enough presence of mind to catch her daughter safely and clear her airways before the overwhelming emotion of the moment hit her like a physical force. She was holding her child, alive and breathing and beautiful, despite being born 2 months early in impossible circumstances. But there was no time to savor the moment. Even as she wrapped the first baby in her softest sweater and held her close. For warmth, Sarah felt her body preparing for the second delivery. The contractions had barely paused, and she realized with a mixture of exhaustion and determination that she was only halfway through this ordeal. The second baby, another girl, arrived. At 3:12 a.m., smaller than her sister, but equally vocal in her displeasure at the cold world she had entered. Sarah caught her with hands that were growing more confident despite her exhaustion, and wrapped her in another layer of clothing before settling both babies against her chest for warmth and comfort. She should have felt relief then, the satisfaction of having successfully delivered her twins under impossible circumstances. Instead, her body sent her a message that defied everything she thought she knew about her pregnancy. The contractions weren't stopping. If anything, they were intensifying again, and the pressure in her abdomen suggested that her ordeal was far from over. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. There were more babies. The ultrasound had been wrong or incomplete, or had somehow missed additional children hidden behind their siblings. As another massive contraction gripped her body, Sarah understood with crystal clarity that she was carrying not twins, but higher-order multiples. The third baby announced itself at 3:31 a.m., and this time Sarah was ready for the intensity of the delivery. This child was a boy, slightly larger than his sisters, but still frighteningly small in her hands. His cry was weaker than the girl's, which worried her. But he was breathing and moving and undeniably alive. 3 babies now nestled against her body, drawing warmth from her skin and finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat. Sarah felt a fierce protectiveness rising in her chest, a maternal instinct so powerful it seemed to give her strength beyond her physical limits. These children had chosen to be born tonight, in this place, and she would find a way to keep them safe. no matter what challenges lay ahead, but her body wasn't finished with its miracles. Even as she marveled at the 3 tiny lives she had brought into the world, the familiar pressure began building again. There was a 4th baby, and it was coming whether Sarah felt ready or not. The final delivery began at 3:47 a.m., and this baby, the smallest of the 4, required every ounce of skill and intuition Sarah had developed over the course of the night. The little boy emerged barely breathing, his color worrying in the firelight. Sarah's nursing instincts, honed through years of caring for others in her role at the library's literacy programs, kicked in immediately. She cleared his airways more aggressively than she had with the others, rubbing his tiny back and breathing gently into his mouth until he finally responded with a weak but determined cry. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, the voice of her 4th child claiming his place in the world. 4 babies, quadruplets. Sarah Mitchell had just delivered quadruplets alone in an abandoned cabin during a blizzard, using nothing but her own determination and the primitive conditions available to her. The magnitude of what she had accomplished didn't fully register as she focused on the immediate needs of her children. All 4 babies were dangerously small, probably weighing less than 3 pounds each. They would need constant warmth, frequent feeding and medical attention that she couldn't provide. But they were alive, breathing, and showing the kind of fighting spirit that suggested they had inherited their mother's determination to survive against impossible odds. Sarah arranged the babies against her body, skin-to-skin contact that would help regulate their temperature and provide the comfort of human connection. She had torn her spare shirt into strips to create makeshift diapers and had used the cleanest cloth she could find to wrap each child individually before nestling them together for warmth. The placental deliveries that followed required careful attention to ensure nothing was retained that could cause infection later. Sarah's exhaustion was profound, but adrenaline and maternal instinct kept her alert and focused on the medical necessities. She had read enough to know that the hours immediately following birth were critical, especially for premature babies born in less than ideal conditions. As dawn approached, marked only by a subtle lightening of the snow-filled sky, visible through the broken windows, Sarah found herself in a situation that would have seemed impossible just 12 hours earlier. She was the mother of quadruplets, born healthy despite their early arrival and the extraordinary circumstances of their delivery. The fire was burning low, and she would need to add more wood soon to maintain the warmth that was keeping her children alive. The storm outside continued unabated, meaning that rescue was still hours or possibly days away. She had accomplished the impossible by delivering 4 healthy babies alone, but now came the even greater challenge of keeping them alive until help could arrive. 4 tiny heartbeats pulsed against her chest, 4 small voices occasionally murmuring their needs, 4 perfect human beings who depended entirely on her strength and resourcefulness for their survival. Sarah Mitchell had become a mother in the most dramatic way possible, and now she faced the ultimate test of her determination to protect the family she had just brought into the world. 27 miles northeast of the abandoned logging cabin, Nathan Cross was already 3 hours into his morning routine when the storm finally began to lose its fury. At 42 years old, Nathan had been living alone in the Colorado wilderness for 8 years, ever since his discharge from the Army Rangers had left him seeking solitude in the mountains that reminded him of Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain. But without the constant threat of enemy fire, his cabin sat at an elevation of nearly 10,000 feet, accessible only by a network of trails that he maintained himself and that most people would consider impassable even in good weather. Nathan preferred it that way. The isolation protected him from the well-meaning questions of civilians who couldn't understand why a decorated veteran would choose to live like a hermit, trading human contact for the honest challenges of survival in one of America's most demanding environments. This morning's trapline check had yielded 2 rabbits and a small beaver, enough protein to supplement his stores for another week. Nathan lived primarily off the land, hunting, fishing, and trapping according to seasonal patterns he had learned through years of careful observation. He sold pelts and handcrafted items to a trading post in Silverton twice a year, earning just enough cash to buy the few supplies he couldn't produce himself: ammunition, salt, sugar, and the occasional book that helped pass the long winter evenings. His military training had taught him to notice details that most people missed, and as he snowshoed down the mountain slope toward the lower valleys, something caught his attention that didn't belong in the natural pattern of the landscape. About a quarter-mile below his position, barely visible through the lifting snow clouds, he spotted what appeared to be the dark outline of a vehicle beside what used to be the old logging road. Nathan paused, pulling his binoculars from his pack to get a better look. The car was definitely abandoned, a small sedan that looked completely out of place in this remote wilderness. Fresh snow had accumulated on its surfaces, but not enough to completely obscure it, suggesting that it had been there for less than 24 hours, which meant someone had been caught in yesterday's blizzard. Probably someone with no business being this far from civilization in those conditions. His first instinct was to avoid involvement. Nathan had chosen his isolated lifestyle specifically to avoid other people's problems, and he'd become skilled at convincing himself that whatever troubles others might face weren't his responsibility. But his military training included search and rescue techniques, and he couldn't ignore the fact that anyone stranded in this area during last night's storm would likely be in serious danger by now. He adjusted his route to investigate, following a game trail that would bring him to the abandoned vehicle while staying concealed in the tree line. Nathan's approach to potentially dangerous situations remained methodical and cautious, habits ingrained by years of combat experience where hasty decisions often proved fatal. The Honda Civic was empty, but Nathan's tracking skills allowed him to read the story written in the snow around it. Someone, a single person based on the footprint size and gait pattern, had left the vehicle and headed uphill toward the old logging area. The tracks were partially filled with snow, but still clear enough to follow for someone with Nathan's experience. The trail led him toward the abandoned logging camp that he had explored years earlier during his initial survey of this territory. He knew the cabin was there, knew it was structurally sound despite years of neglect, and realized that anyone caught in the storm might have found it as emergency shelter. What concerned him was the silence. No smoke rising from the chimney. No signs of ongoing habitation that would indicate the stranded person had successfully survived the night. As Nathan approached the cabin, his enhanced hearing picked up something that stopped him in his tracks. It was faint, barely audible over the wind in the trees, but unmistakable once he focused on it, the sound of babies crying. Multiple babies, their voices thin and urgent in the morning air. The discovery transformed his careful approach into an urgent mission. Nathan had delivered enough calves and foals during his youth on his family's ranch to recognize the distinctive cry of very young, very vulnerable newborns. Someone in that cabin needed immediate help, and the baby's cries suggested a situation far more complex than a simple case of someone seeking storm shelter. He reached the cabin door in less than a minute, his military conditioning allowing him to move quickly and quietly across the uneven terrain. The door hung partially open, and through the gap he could see the flickering light of a fire and the silhouette of someone sitting near the fireplace. "Hello in there," Nathan called out, his voice pitched to carry authority without threat. "I heard crying. Do you need assistance?" The response was immediate, a woman's voice, hoarse with exhaustion, but alert with the protective instincts of new motherhood. "Please, I need help. My babies, they came early. I don't know how to keep them warm enough." Nathan pushed through the door and immediately grasped the magnitude of the situation confronting him. A young woman, pale and clearly exhausted, sat, propped against the wall near the fireplace, with 4 tiny infants nestled against her body. 4 babies, each smaller than any newborn he had ever seen, their cries weak but persistent in the cabin's warm air. "Jesus," he breathed, his usual stoic composure cracking at the sight. "How long ago were they born?" "A few hours," Sarah managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think around dawn. I tried to keep them warm, but they're so small, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next." Nathan's military medical training kicked in immediately. He had been a combat medic before becoming a ranger, and while he had never delivered babies, he understood hypothermia, dehydration, and the critical importance of maintaining core body temperature in vulnerable patients. "Mum, I'm Nathan Cross. I live up the mountain and I've got medical training. We need to get you and these babies to a hospital as soon as possible, but first we need to stabilize their condition." He knelt beside Sarah and the babies, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he assessed their condition. All 4 infants were breathing, though their respirations were rapid and shallow. Their skin color was acceptable given their premature status, but he could see they were losing body heat faster than they could generate it. "Have they been nursing?" Nathan asked, falling into the clinical mindset that helped him focus on solutions rather than emotions. "A little," Sarah replied, "but I don't think I'm producing enough milk yet, and they're so weak." Nathan nodded, understanding the challenge. Premature babies often struggled with feeding, and their mother's milk production might not have fully established yet. Without proper nutrition and warmth, these infants wouldn't survive long, even if they had managed to make it through their first critical hours. "We need to get them to Denver General immediately," he said, already calculating routes and transportation options. "But the roads won't be passable for hours, maybe days, depending on how much snow fell overnight." Sarah's face crumpled with despair. "They're going to die, aren't they? I brought them into the world, but I can't keep them alive." "No," Nathan said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command decisions under pressure. "We're not going to let that happen, but we need to be smart about this." He stood and began pacing the small cabin, his mind working through the logistics of what would be required to save 4 premature infants in one of the most remote locations in Colorado. His survival supplies included high-energy foods, water, purification tablets, emergency medical kit, and cold weather gear. More importantly, he had communication equipment that might allow them to call for help even from this remote location. "I've got a satellite communicator up at my place," Nathan explained. "Emergency GPS beacon that can reach search and rescue even from here. But it's a 3-hour hike in good conditions, probably 4 or 5 hours in this snow." The dilemma was obvious. He couldn't leave Sarah and the babies alone for that long, but he also couldn't carry them all to his cabin through deep snow and freezing temperatures. The babies were too fragile for such a journey, and Sarah was in no condition for a grueling mountain hike so soon after giving birth. "There might be another option," Nathan said slowly, an idea forming as he considered their resources. "I've got a friend who flies search and rescue out of Grand Junction. If I can raise him on my radio, he might be able to get a helicopter in here once the weather clears enough for safe flying." Sarah looked up at him with eyes that held the first glimmer of hope she had felt since the ordeal began. "Do you really think that could work?" "It's our best shot," Nathan replied honestly. "But first, we need to make sure these babies stay stable until help arrives. That means keeping them warm, getting some nutrition into them, and monitoring their breathing." He began inventorying his supplies and the cabin's resources, his mind automatically shifting into mission planning mode. Nathan had survived impossible situations before by breaking complex problems down into manageable components and addressing each challenge systematically. "Tell me your name," he said as he worked, recognizing that establishing personal connection would help maintain morale during what might be a long wait for rescue. "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, adjusting her hold on the babies to ensure they remained in contact with her skin. "These are, well, I don't even have names for them yet. I was expecting twins, not 4 babies." Nathan paused in his inventory to look at the 4 small faces peering out from their makeshift blankets. Each child was clearly an individual, despite their identical circumstances, different expressions, different sizes, different responses to their environment. "They're fighters," he observed. "Takes serious determination to survive what they've been through already." As Nathan organized their survival strategy, he found himself deeply moved by the courage this young woman had shown. To deliver 4 babies alone, in these conditions, and keep them alive through their first critical hours, represented a level of strength and determination that impressed even someone with his extensive experience in extreme situations. "We're going to get through this," he told Sarah with conviction. "All of us. These babies chose a hell of a tough way to enter the world, but they've got a mother who's proven she won't give up on them." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to break, revealing patches of blue sky that offered hope for the rescue mission Nathan was already planning in careful detail. Nathan's journey back to his cabin through the snow-laden forest was the most urgent 3-hour hike of his life. He had left Sarah with detailed instructions for maintaining the baby's body temperature, strict schedules for attempted feeding, and emergency protocols if any of the infants showed signs of distress. More importantly, he had left her with his promise that help was coming, a commitment that now drove him up the mountain slopes with single-minded determination. His own cabin, when he finally reached it after pushing his physical limits through the deep snow, represented 8 years of careful preparation and self-sufficiency. Solar panels provided limited electricity for essential equipment. A wood-burning stove kept the interior warm, and shelves lined with preserved foods, medical supplies, and emergency gear demonstrated his commitment to complete independence from the outside world. But today, that carefully maintained isolation would be broken by necessity. Nathan's radio equipment occupied one corner of the main room, a sophisticated setup that included both shortwave and satellite communication systems. He had maintained the equipment meticulously, despite rarely using it, understanding that emergency situations might eventually require contact with the outside world. Today was that day. His first call went to Marcus Webb, a helicopter pilot based in Grand Junction, who specialized in search and rescue operations throughout the Colorado Rockies. Nathan and Marcus had served together in Afghanistan, where Marcus flew medical evacuation missions that had saved countless lives, including Nathan's, during a firefight that had left him with shrapnel scars and a permanent distrust of crowded places. "Webb here," came the familiar voice through the radio static. "Marcus, it's Nathan Cross. I need an emergency medical evacuation from the old logging camp near Silverton. We've got a woman and 4 newborn babies, all requiring immediate hospital transport." The pause that followed lasted long enough for Nathan to worry that the connection had been lost. "Finally," Marcus responded, his tone reflecting the gravity of the situation. 4 newborns. Jesus, Nathan, what kind of situation have you stumbled into up there?" Nathan provided a concise summary of the circumstances while checking weather reports. On his satellite internet connection, the storm system was moving east, but winds remained problematic for helicopter operations, and visibility was still severely limited in the mountain valleys. "I can't get airborne until this afternoon at the earliest," Marcus reported after consulting his own weather data. Even then, landing in that terrain with snow cover is going to be tricky as hell. I'll need to coordinate with Denver General to have a neonatal team standing by. How long before you can reach us? Nathan asked, calculating the time the babies could realistically survive without advanced medical intervention. If the weather cooperates, I could be there by 3 p.m. That's assuming I can find a safe landing zone and that the wind dies down enough for safe operations. Nathan checked his watch. 9:30 a.m. 5.5 hours. The babies had been born approximately 6 hours ago, which meant they were approaching the 12-hour mark that often represented a critical threshold for premature infant survival. Every hour that passed reduced their chances of avoiding serious complications. I'm heading back down to them now, Nathan told Marcus. I'll mark a landing zone and keep them stable until you arrive. His second radio call went to the Colorado State Patrol, reporting the abandoned vehicle and requesting that search and rescue teams be placed on standby. He provided GPS coordinates for both the car and the cabin, ensuring that ground-based rescue teams would be available as backup if weather conditions prevented helicopter evacuation. The descent back to the logging cabin took Nathan less than 2 hours, his familiarity with the terrain allowing him to follow more direct routes than he had used during his careful approach that morning. He carried additional supplies this time: high-energy foods suitable for a nursing mother, clean blankets, a portable propane heater, and most importantly, an emergency medical kit that included infant-sized equipment. When he reached the cabin, he found Sarah exactly where he had left her, still maintaining skin-to-skin contact with all 4 babies, despite obvious exhaustion. She looked up as he entered, relief flooding her features at his return. "How are they doing?" Nathan asked, immediately assessing the baby's condition with the clinical eye of someone trained in emergency medicine. The smallest one, the last. "Boy-born. He's been having trouble breathing," Sarah reported, her voice tight with worry. "And none of them have nursed much. I don't think I'm producing enough milk yet." Nathan examined the baby Sarah indicated, noting the slightly blue tinge around his lips and the rapid, shallow breathing pattern that suggested respiratory distress. Premature babies often struggled with underdeveloped lungs, and this infant was showing classic signs of respiratory insufficiency. "We need to keep his airways clear and maintain warmth," Nathan said, gently repositioning the baby to optimize his breathing. "I've got help coming, but we need to keep all 4 of them stable for several more hours." He set up the propane heater at a safe distance from the fireplace, creating additional warmth without risking carbon monoxide poisoning. The cabin's temperature rose noticeably, and all 4 babies seemed to respond positively to the improved conditions. "I brought some concentrated nutrition supplements," Nathan explained, showing Sarah the high-calorie energy bars and vitamin-enriched drinks from his emergency supplies. "If you can get some of this into your system, it should help with milk production." As Sarah ate, Nathan worked on preparing a suitable landing zone for Marcus's helicopter. The clearing outside the cabin was large enough, but he needed to mark it clearly and ensure that the rotor wash wouldn't create hazardous debris. He used reflective emergency tape to outline the landing area and positioned colored smoke flares at strategic points that would help Marcus locate them even in limited visibility. "Tell me about yourself," Nathan said as he worked, recognizing that conversation would help maintain Sarah's morale during the long wait ahead. "What brought you to Colorado?" Sarah shared her story, the death of her brother, the journey to collect his belongings, the unexpected breakdown that had led to her taking shelter in the cabin. As she talked, Nathan began to understand the chain of circumstances that had brought them together, and he found himself admiring her determination to honor her brother's memory despite the personal cost. "Jake struggled with addiction for years," Sarah explained, her voice carrying old pain. "I tried to help him, but there's only so much you can do when someone isn't ready to accept help. I thought maybe if I could understand his life up here, find some peace with how things ended between us. Nathan understood the complexity of family relationships strained by addiction. His own military service had introduced him to too many. Good people destroyed by substances they used to cope with trauma and pain. Sarah's desire to understand her brother's choices spoke to a compassion that had probably made his loss even more difficult to bear. By noon, all 4 babies were showing signs of stabilization. Their breathing had improved with the warmer temperatures, and Sarah's increased nutrition was beginning to show results in her milk production. The smallest baby, whom Sarah had begun calling Thomas after her father, remained a concern, but his condition hadn't deteriorated further. Nathan established a routine of checking each infant every 15 minutes, monitoring their breathing, temperature, and responsiveness. His military medical training proved invaluable as he assessed their condition and made minute adjustments to their positioning and warmth management. "I never expected to become a mother this way," Sarah confided. "During one of these check-ins, I had it all planned out. The hospital, the nursery, everything organized and safe. Instead, they chose to be born in the middle of nowhere during a blizzard with no warning. Sometimes the most important things in life don't wait for perfect circumstances," Nathan replied, surprised by his own philosophical response. His years of isolation had made him uncomfortable with personal conversations, but something about this situation, or perhaps about Sarah herself, seemed to bypass his usual social awkwardness. At 1:30 p.m., Nathan's radio crackled with Marcus's voice reporting that he was airborne and en route to their location. Weather conditions had improved enough for safe flying, and Denver General Hospital had a full neonatal intensive care team standing by for their arrival. "ETA 20 minutes, Marcus reported. "I can see your smoke markers from about 10 miles. Out. Nice work on the landing zone prep." Nathan felt a surge of relief that surprised him with its intensity. Over the past several hours, he had become emotionally invested in the survival of these 4 tiny lives in a way that challenged his carefully maintained emotional distance from other people's problems. "Hear that?" he told Sarah, who was listening to the radio conversation with tears of relief beginning to form in her eyes. "Help is almost here. In less than an hour, you and these babies will be in the best neonatal unit in Colorado." As they prepared for the helicopter's arrival, Nathan found himself reluctant to see this extraordinary day end. For the first time in 8 years, he had been needed by someone else, had made a difference in a way that mattered profoundly. The isolation that had seemed like protection now felt more like self-imposed exile from the connections that gave life meaning. The sound of approaching rotor blades grew louder in the mountain air, carrying with it the promise of safety for 4 very special babies and their remarkable mother. The helicopter's distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp grew steadily louder until it dominated the mountain air around the logging cabin. Nathan stood in the marked landing zone, orange smoke billowing from the flares he had positioned to indicate wind direction and safe approach vectors. Through the aircraft's windscreen, he could see Marcus Webb's familiar silhouette as the experienced pilot maneuvered his machine into position above the clearing. Landing a helicopter in mountain terrain required exceptional skill under the best circumstances, but doing so with fresh snow, uncertain ground conditions, and precious cargo waiting created additional challenges that tested even Marcus's considerable abilities. The rotor wash sent snow swirling in blinding clouds as the aircraft settled toward the earth, its skids probing carefully for solid purchase on the uneven ground. Sarah watched from the cabin doorway, all 4 babies bundled against her chest. In a carrier Nathan had improvised from his emergency gear, the sight of the rescue helicopter filling her view seemed almost surreal after the night of isolation and struggle. Help had actually arrived. Her children were going to receive the medical care they desperately needed. The moment the helicopter touched down and its engines began spooling down to idle, the rear doors burst open to reveal a medical team that moved with practiced efficiency. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Denver General's chief of neonatal intensive care, emerged first, followed by two specialized nurses carrying equipment specifically designed for premature infant transport. 4 babies, approximately 8 hours old, estimated gestational age 32 weeks. Nathan called out over the engine noise, providing the medical team with critical information as they approached the cabin. His combat medic training had taught him to communicate essential patient data quickly and clearly during emergency evacuations. Dr. Rodriguez was a compact woman in her 40s, whose calm demeanor masked years of experience dealing with the most challenging cases in neonatal medicine. She had been working in the NICU for 15 years and had seen every possible complication that could affect premature babies, but the circumstances of this case were unlike anything in her professional experience. "Let's get them loaded and assessed," she called to her team while entering the cabin to examine Sarah and the babies. Her hands moved with gentle expertise as she conducted rapid but thorough evaluations of each infant, checking respiratory function, heart rate, and neurological responses. "Remarkable," she murmured after completing her initial assessment. "Given the circumstances of their birth and the conditions they've endured, all 4 babies are in surprisingly stable condition. Their APGAR scores are better than I would have expected for 32-week prematures, delivered without medical assistance. The transport process required careful coordination to ensure that all 4 babies remained warm and stable during the short journey from cabin to helicopter. The medical team had brought a specialized transport incubator designed to accommodate multiple infants, complete with individual monitoring systems for each baby. Nathan assisted with the evacuation, his military training making him a valuable additional team member during the complex loading process. As he helped secure the babies in their transport system, he found himself memorizing their small faces, already feeling protective attachment to these children whose arrival had transformed his solitary existence. "What about the mother, Doctor?" Rodriguez asked, turning her attention to Sarah after ensuring the babies were properly secured. "How are you feeling? Any concerning symptoms since delivery?" Sarah underwent a quick medical evaluation that revealed exhaustion and dehydration, but no immediate complications from her extraordinary delivery experience. The doctor was amazed by her apparent recovery, attributing it to adrenaline, determination, and the remarkable resilience that some women displayed in extreme circumstances. "You did something incredible," Dr. Rodriguez told Sarah as they prepared for departure. "Delivering 1 baby under these conditions would have been remarkable. 4 healthy babies represents a medical miracle that I'll be discussing in professional journals for years to come." As the helicopter prepared for takeoff, Nathan realized he was facing a decision point that would affect the rest of his life. He could return to his mountain cabin, resume his solitary existence, and file this experience away as an unusual interruption to his normal routine. Or he could acknowledge that something fundamental had changed in him during the past 12 hours. "I'd like to visit them in the hospital," he told Sarah as the medical team completed their pre-flight preparations. "To see how they're doing, make sure they're all right." Sarah's smile was radiant with gratitude and something deeper, an emotional connection that had formed between them through shared crisis and mutual dependence. "I'd like that very much. I think the babies would want to meet the man who helped save their lives." The flight to Denver General took 45 minutes, with the medical team monitoring all 4 babies continuously during the journey. Nathan sat beside Sarah, both of them watching the specialized equipment that tracked their children's vital signs with electronic precision. The helicopter's crew had arranged for Nathan to accompany them, recognizing his role in the rescue and his obvious emotional investment in the outcome. Dr. Rodriguez used the flight time to ask detailed questions about the delivery process, gathering information that would help her provide optimal care for the babies. Sarah's account of the night's events left the medical team speechless. The idea that someone with no formal training had successfully delivered quadruplets in primitive conditions defied conventional medical wisdom. "The babies are going to need intensive care for several weeks," Dr. Rodriguez explained as they approached the hospital. 32-week babies typically require respiratory support, feeding assistance, and careful temperature regulation. But given their strong initial presentation, I'm optimistic about their long-term prognosis. Denver General Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit occupied an entire floor of the medical center's newest wing. The NICU represented the pinnacle of modern medicine's ability to care for the most vulnerable patients, premature babies whose survival depended on sophisticated technology and expert medical intervention. The admission process moved with well-rehearsed efficiency. Each baby was placed in an individual incubator with comprehensive monitoring systems, feeding tubes, and respiratory support equipment. Within an hour of their arrival, all 4 infants were stable and receiving the specialized care they required. Sarah was admitted to the maternity ward for observation and recovery, her room strategically located near the NICU to facilitate frequent visits with her children. The hospital staff recognized the extraordinary nature of her case and provided exceptional support during her initial adjustment to motherhood under such unusual circumstances. Nathan found himself in an unfamiliar environment as he navigated the hospital's corridors and waiting areas. After 8 years of mountain solitude, the bustle of medical personnel, visiting families, and institutional routine felt overwhelming. But his concern for Sarah and the babies overrode his discomfort. With crowds and social interaction, "Mr. Cross," Dr. Rodriguez approached him in the NICU waiting area late that evening. "I wanted to thank you personally for your role in this rescue. Without your medical knowledge and quick thinking, we might have had a very different outcome." Nathan felt uncomfortable with praise, preferring to focus on practical matters rather than acknowledgement of his actions. "How are they doing? Is there anything else they need?" "All 4 babies are responding well to treatment. The smallest boy, Thomas, required some additional respiratory support, but he's showing steady improvement. The 3 girls are actually ahead of the typical development curve for babies of their gestational age." As the days passed, Nathan established a routine of visiting the hospital twice daily, spending hours in the NICU watching the babies progress, and providing companionship for Sarah during her recovery. He found himself learning the names and personalities of each child. Emma, the largest and most assertive; Grace, calm and observant; Hope, who seemed to respond most strongly to voices; and Thomas, the smallest but most determined fighter. The hospital social workers initially questioned Nathan's involvement, uncertain about the relationship between the mountain hermit and the new mother. But Sarah's obvious trust in him, combined with his genuine concern for the children's welfare, gradually convinced the staff that his presence was beneficial rather than concerning. "I never expected to care about anyone this much again," Nathan confided to Sarah during one of their quiet conversations in the NICU. "After I left the army, I thought I was done with being responsible for other people's lives." Sarah understood the significance of his admission. Through their conversations over the past week, she had learned about his military service, his struggles with civilian readjustment, and his choice to embrace isolation as protection against further emotional investment in others' welfare. "Maybe you weren't done," she suggested gently. "Maybe you just needed the right people to care about." The baby's medical progress exceeded all expectations. Within 2 weeks, All four were breathing independently, gaining weight steadily, and showing the neurological development patterns that indicated normal cognitive function. Dr. Rodriguez described their recovery as remarkably rapid for babies born under such challenging circumstances. As Sarah prepared for discharge with her children, she faced practical challenges that seemed almost as daunting as delivering them in the wilderness. She had no permanent housing suitable for 4 infants, limited financial resources, and no support network in Colorado beyond the unexpected friendship that had developed with Nathan. "I've been thinking," Nathan said during their last evening, in the hospital. "My cabin is large enough for a family, and it's completely self-sufficient. If you and the babies need a place to stay while you figure out your next steps, the offer is there." Sarah looked at him with surprise and growing understanding. This man, who had chosen isolation, was offering to share his sanctuary with a woman and 4 babies who would transform his quiet existence into something completely different. "Are you sure?" she asked. "4 babies are going to change everything." "About your life up there," Nathan smiled, an expression that had become more frequent during their time together. "Maybe it's time for everything to change." The journey back to Nathan's mountain cabin 3 weeks later looked nothing like his solitary hikes of the past 8 years. A modified all-terrain vehicle, borrowed from the hospital's rural outreach program, carried Sarah and the 4 babies up trails that Nathan had widened and reinforced in preparation for his new responsibilities as surrogate father and protector. Dr. Rodriguez had initially been skeptical about releasing premature babies to such a remote location, but Nathan's demonstrated competence with infant care, combined with his comprehensive emergency medical supplies and satellite communication capabilities, had eventually convinced her that the babies might actually thrive in the clean mountain air and stress-free environment. "I've equipped you with everything short of a portable NICU," she had told them at discharge, providing specialized monitors, oxygen concentrators, and feeding equipment that could operate on Nathan's solar power system. "But if any of the babies show concerning symptoms, I want them back here immediately." The cabin that had sheltered one reclusive veteran for 8 years had been transformed into something resembling a modern nursery, crossed with a wilderness survival station. Nathan had spent the past 2 weeks installing additional insulation, upgrading his heating system, and creating specialized sleeping areas that could safely accommodate 4 infants while maintaining the security and self-sufficiency that defined his lifestyle. Sarah's first view of Nathan's home revealed the depth of preparation he had undertaken for their arrival. The main room now contained 4 handcrafted cribs arranged near the fireplace for warmth, a comfortable nursing chair positioned to take advantage of natural light from the expanded windows, and storage systems for the massive quantities of supplies required to care for quadruplets. "You built all of this?" Sarah asked, marveling at the precision carpentry and thoughtful design that had transformed the rustic cabin into a functional family home. "I had some time on my hands," Nathan replied with characteristic understatement, though his obvious pride in the work was unmistakable. "Military engineering training comes in handy for projects like this." The first weeks of life at the cabin established routines that would have seemed impossible to either of them just a month earlier. Nathan proved surprisingly adaptable to the demands of infant care, his military discipline providing structure for the complex scheduling required to feed, monitor, and care for 4 babies with slightly different needs and development patterns. Emma, the largest and most assertive of the quadruplets, had established herself as the leader among her siblings, often crying to alert the adults when one of the others needed attention. Grace maintained her calm, observant nature, seeming to study her surroundings with an intelligence that amazed both Nathan and Sarah. Hope responded most strongly to music and voices, settling immediately whenever Nathan played his guitar or Sarah sang lullabies, Thomas, the smallest but most determined, continued to require careful monitoring but showed steady progress in reaching developmental milestones. "They each have completely different personalities already," Sarah observed during one of their evening conversations after all 4 babies had settled for the night. "It's like they decided to divide up different aspects of human nature among themselves." Nathan had discovered an unexpected talent for infant care that surprised him with its naturalness. His hands, accustomed to handling weapons and survival equipment, proved equally skilled at changing diapers, preparing bottles, and providing the gentle touch that soothed fussy babies. More importantly, he had developed an emotional attachment to each child that filled a void in his life he hadn't realized existed. "I never thought about having children," he confided to Sarah one evening as they watched the babies sleep peacefully in their cribs. Military life didn't seem compatible with family responsibilities, and afterward, isolation felt safer than risking that kind of emotional investment. Sarah understood the significance of his admission. Through their daily conversations and shared responsibilities, she had learned about the experiences that had driven Nathan to seek solitude. Friends lost in combat, the difficulty of civilian readjustment, and a general distrust of situations where his actions might fail to protect people he cared about. "Maybe these 4 decided you were ready for family responsibilities," she suggested, watching Nathan unconsciously adjust Thomas's blanket with the protective instincts of an experienced father. "They certainly seem to think you belong in their lives." The practical challenges of raising quadruplets in wilderness isolation required constant innovation and adaptation. Nathan's engineering skills proved invaluable for creating solutions to problems that conventional parents never faced: how to maintain sterile bottle preparation without running water, how to monitor 4 babies simultaneously during outdoor activities, how to ensure adequate nutrition for a nursing mother when the nearest grocery store was 50 miles away. Sarah's recovery progressed remarkably well in the mountain environment. The clean air, nutritious food from Nathan's extensive preserves, and absence of urban stress created optimal conditions for healing and bonding with her children. Her milk production stabilized at levels sufficient to partially nurse all 4 babies, supplemented by carefully prepared formula when necessary. The outside world intruded occasionally through Nathan's radio communications and internet connection. News organizations had discovered the story of quadruplets born during a blizzard and rescued by a mountain hermit, creating media attention that neither Nathan nor Sarah welcomed. They had agreed to refuse all interview requests, preferring to focus on their children's development rather than public curiosity about their unusual circumstances. Dr. Rodriguez conducted weekly video consultations to monitor the baby's progress, expressing amazement at their development in the mountain environment. All 4 infants were exceeding normal growth curves for their corrected gestational age, suggesting that Nathan's carefully controlled environment and Sarah's dedicated care were providing optimal conditions for healthy development. "I'm seeing muscle tone, neurological responses, and social engagement that I would expect from full-term babies," Dr. Rodriguez reported during one consultation. "Whatever you're doing up there, keep doing it. These children are thriving in ways that conventional medicine can't fully explain." The seasonal transition from winter to spring brought new challenges and opportunities to their mountain family. Nathan began teaching Sarah wilderness skills: how to identify edible plants, how to track weather patterns, how to navigate the trail system that connected his cabin to the outside world. She proved an eager student, recognizing that life with Nathan meant becoming competent in survival skills that most people never needed to develop. "I want to be a full partner in this life," Sarah explained as she practiced with Nathan's emergency radio equipment. "Not just someone you're taking care of. If we're going to raise these children together, I need to be able to contribute equally to their safety and security." Nathan's response revealed how much his perspective on relationships and partnership had evolved since the night he found Sarah and the babies in the logging cabin. "You've been a full partner since the moment I walked into that cabin," he told her. "Everything we've built here, we've built together." The development of romantic feelings between them had been gradual and unspoken, growing naturally from shared responsibilities and mutual respect. Both recognized the attraction that had developed, but both also understood that their first priority was the children's welfare and adjustment to their unusual family situation. The turning point came during a late spring evening when all four babies were sleeping peacefully, and Sarah and Nathan found themselves alone together for the first time in weeks. The conversation that followed addressed feelings they had both been carefully avoiding while focusing on more immediate responsibilities. "I need you to know that I'm not staying here just because I need help with the babies," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "I'm staying because I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else." Nathan's response came slowly, his emotional reticence still battling with feelings that had grown too strong to ignore. "I spent 8 years convincing myself that I was better off alone. Then you and 4 tiny babies proved me wrong in a single night." Their first kiss happened naturally, without drama or grand gestures, just two people acknowledging feelings that had developed through shared crisis and daily partnership. It marked the transformation of their relationship from mutual dependence to conscious choice, from temporary arrangement to permanent commitment. "We're an unconventional family," Sarah observed as they held each other in the firelight, listening to the peaceful sounds of their sleeping children. A hermit, a single mother, and 4 babies who decided to be born in a blizzard. "Unconventional families are sometimes the strongest ones," Nathan replied, his arms tightening around her with protective certainty. "These children chose us for each other, and we chose each other for them." Outside the cabin, spring snow began falling gently through the mountain darkness, adding another layer of beauty to the wilderness sanctuary where love had found a way to create family from the most unlikely circumstances. The first official visitors to Nathan's mountain sanctuary arrived on a crisp October morning, 6 months after the quadruplets' dramatic birth. Sarah was hanging laundry on the line Nathan had strung between 2 pine trees when she spotted the convoy of vehicles making their way up the improved trail, 2 black SUVs and a white van with government plates that immediately set her maternal instincts on high alert. The babies were napping inside the cabin, finally adjusted to a schedule that allowed Sarah and Nathan precious hours of productivity during the day. At 6 months old, Emma, Grace, Hope and Thomas had developed into healthy, alert infants whose progress continued to amaze Dr. Rodriguez during her monthly video consultations. But the arrival of official vehicles suggested that their peaceful mountain existence was about to face challenges from the outside world. Nathan emerged from the workshop he had built behind the cabin, his carpenter's apron still dusted with sawdust from the high chairs he was crafting for the baby's upcoming transition to solid foods. His expression hardened as he recognized the government vehicles, his military training automatically assessing potential threats and defensive positions. "Stay with the babies," he told Sarah quietly. "Let me handle this." The lead vehicle disgorged. 3 people in business attire that looked completely out of place in the wilderness setting, 2 women and 1 man, all carrying clipboards and briefcases that suggested bureaucratic rather than friendly intentions. The van revealed additional personnel, including what appeared to be a photographer and someone with medical equipment. "Mr. Cross?" "I'm Janet Morrison from Colorado Department of Social Services," announced the lead woman, a stern-faced official in her 50s who surveyed the cabin and its surroundings with obvious skepticism. "We're here to conduct a welfare assessment regarding the 4 Mitchell children currently residing at this location." Nathan's jaw tightened at the formal language and implied accusations. On whose authority? We received reports expressing concern about the safety and welfare of premature infants being raised in an isolated location without adequate medical supervision or educational resources, Morrison replied, consulting her clipboard. State law requires us to investigate any situation that might compromise child welfare. The second woman, younger and carrying camera equipment, introduced herself as Linda Chen, a child welfare specialist whose job was to document living conditions and assess whether the environment met state standards for child safety. The man, Dr. Robert Hartley, was a pediatrician assigned to conduct medical evaluations of the children. Sarah appeared in the cabin doorway, her maternal protective instincts fully activated despite Nathan's instruction to remain inside. "Who reported concerns about my children?" she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of a mother defending her young. "That information is confidential," Morrison replied with bureaucratic coldness. "However, I can tell you that multiple parties have expressed concerns about the unconventional living situation and the potential risks to child development in such an isolated environment." The inspection that followed was both thorough and intrusive. Linda Chen photographed every aspect of the cabin's interior and exterior, documenting the cribs, safety measures, food storage, and sanitation facilities with clinical detachment. Dr. Hartley examined each baby individually, checking development milestones and comparing their progress to standardized charts. Nathan and Sarah answered hundreds of questions about daily routines, emergency procedures, educational plans, and long-term goals for the children's development. The investigators were particularly focused on Nathan's lack of formal childcare training and Sarah's decision to live in isolation rather than seeking support from established social services. "Mr. Cross, you have no formal education in child development, no certification in infant care, and no legal relationship to these children," Morrison observed while reviewing her notes. "Can you explain why you believe you're qualified to participate in raising 4 premature infants?" Nathan's response was measured but forceful. "I can explain that these children are healthy, happy, and developing ahead of normal curves according to their pediatrician. I can explain that they've never spent a night without both parents present, never gone hungry, and never lacked for medical attention when needed." "But you're not their parent," Morrison pressed. "You're an unmarried man with no legal standing, who has assumed responsibility for children born to a woman you barely know." The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Nathan saved our lives," she said fiercely. "He's been nothing but devoted to these children since the moment he found us. They love him and he loves them. What more qualification do you need than that?" Dr. Hartley's medical evaluation proved more positive than the social assessment. All 4 babies showed excellent development in motor skills, cognitive responses, and social interaction. Their weight and height measurements placed them in normal ranges for their corrected age, and their neurological responses suggested no developmental delays or complications from their dramatic birth circumstances. "From a purely medical perspective," Dr. Hartley admitted privately to Morrison, "these children are thriving. Their development patterns are actually superior to what I typically see in children from more conventional backgrounds. But medical success didn't address the bureaucratic concerns about unconventional family structures and isolated living conditions." Morrison made it clear that the state had reservations about allowing 4 children to be raised by unmarried adults in a location 50 miles from the nearest school, medical facility, or social services support. "We're not prepared to remove the children at this time," Morrison announced after completing her assessment. "However, this case will remain under active supervision. We'll require monthly visits, documentation of the children's educational, progress and evidence of plans for their integration into conventional social and educational systems as they reach school age. The investigators also delivered an ultimatum that struck at the heart of Sarah and Nathan's relationship. If Mr. Cross intends to continue serving as a parental figure for these children, he'll need to either marry Ms. Mitchell or complete formal adoption procedures. The state cannot continue to recognize informal custody arrangements for children this young. After the officials departed, Sarah and Nathan sat in their kitchen, holding hands across the table while the babies played in their interconnected cribs nearby. The morning's confrontation had shattered the peaceful isolation they had built together, forcing them to confront external pressures they had hoped to avoid. "They're trying to force us to choose between our relationship and the children's welfare," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. As if love and commitment weren't more important than legal paperwork. Nathan understood the deeper implications of the state's demands. Marriage would provide legal protection for their family structure, but it would also formalize a relationship that had developed naturally and gradually. The question was whether their love could withstand the pressure of external demands and artificial timelines. "What do you want?" Nathan asked, his grey eyes serious as he studied Sarah's face. "Not what the state wants, not what's convenient. What do you want for us and for the children?" Sarah's answer came from the heart, rather than the head. "I want us to be a real family, legally and completely. I want you to be their father in every way that matters. And I want to be your wife, not because the government demands it, but because I can't imagine my life any other way." Nathan's proposal, when it came, was as practical and sincere as everything else about their relationship. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you let me adopt Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas? Will you help me build a life that's strong enough to protect what we've created together?" Her acceptance was immediate and wholehearted, sealed with a kiss that carried the weight of commitment to each other and to the 4 children who had brought them together in the most extraordinary circumstances imaginable. The wedding planning that followed was unlike anything either of them had ever imagined. They wanted a ceremony that honored both their love and their children's role in bringing them together. But they also needed legal proceedings that would satisfy the state's requirements for adoption and family formation. Dr. Rodriguez agreed to serve as a witness, bringing with her a comprehensive medical report documenting the children's remarkable progress under Sarah and Nathan's care. Marcus Webb, the helicopter pilot who had rescued them, offered to officiate the ceremony using his credentials as a licensed minister, a qualification he had obtained during his own military service to perform memorial services for fallen comrades. "You're getting married to satisfy a bunch of bureaucrats," Marcus observed during their planning conversations. "But you're also formalizing something that was already real the moment Nathan decided to risk his life hiking down that mountain. To help you, the ceremony itself took place in the meadow behind Nathan's cabin on a brilliant November morning, with the 4 babies serving as the most important witnesses to their parents' commitment. Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas were old enough now to sit supported in specially designed chairs, their bright eyes taking in the proceedings with the alert curiosity that characterized all their interactions with the world. Sarah wore a simple, white dress that Nathan had ordered from Denver, while he had traded his usual work clothes for a suit that transformed his rugged appearance into something almost formal. But the most meaningful elements of the ceremony were the vows they had written themselves, promising not just to love each other, but to protect and nurture the children who had made their love possible. "6 months ago, you saved our lives," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the mountain meadow. "Today I'm promising to spend the rest of my life proving worthy of that rescue." Nathan's response was equally heartfelt. "You and these 4 children taught me that love is stronger Then fear that family is more important than safety, and that some things are worth risking everything to protect. As they exchanged rings crafted from silver, Nathan had mined himself from the mountain streams. The quadruplets provided their own commentary through coos, babbles, and the kind of delighted squealing that suggested their approval of the proceedings. The legal adoption that followed made Nathan officially the father of Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas Cross, giving him all the rights and responsibilities that came with parenthood. More importantly, it provided the legal framework that would protect their family from future bureaucratic interference. "Now we're bulletproof," Nathan told Sarah as they reviewed the completed legal documents. "No one can question our right to raise these children together." But even as they celebrated their legal victory, both Sarah and Nathan understood that their real challenges were just beginning. 4 rapidly growing children would soon outgrow the mountain cabin's capacity. Educational needs would eventually require difficult decisions about schooling and social interaction, and the outside world would continue to press against the boundaries of their carefully constructed sanctuary. For now, though, they were complete. A family forged by extraordinary circumstances, strengthened by shared challenges, and united by love that had grown from the most unlikely beginnings into something unshakable and permanent. 2 years after their mountain wedding, the Cross family faced their most significant challenge yet. 4 toddlers who had outgrown both their cribs and the confined space of the mountain cabin. Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas, now walking and beginning to talk, required constant supervision and increasingly sophisticated entertainment that tested even Nathan's engineering creativity and Sarah's educational resourcefulness. The cabin that had seemed spacious enough for a hermit's solitary existence felt cramped, with 4 energetic 2-year-olds exploring every corner, climbing every surface, and turning Nathan's carefully organized survival supplies into toys for their endless games of discovery. Sarah had transformed one corner into a makeshift classroom where she worked with each child on basic skills like color recognition, counting, and simple vocabulary. But she was increasingly aware that their educational needs would soon exceed what she could provide in isolation. "They need playmates," Sarah observed one afternoon as she watched Emma organize her siblings into an elaborate game that involved building blocks, stuffed animals, and a complex set of rules that only she seemed to understand. "They're incredibly social creatures, but they're only interacting with each other and us." Nathan understood the implications of Sarah's observation. The children's development was progressing normally in most areas. Their language skills were actually advanced for their age, probably due to the constant one-on-one attention they received from their parents. But their social development was limited by their isolation from other children, and their understanding of the wider world was restricted to what they could experience within hiking distance of the cabin. The solution they eventually developed required months of planning and represented the most significant change to Nathan's lifestyle since the night he had found Sarah and the babies in the logging cabin. They would build a larger home closer to civilization while maintaining the self-sufficiency and security that had made their mountain sanctuary successful. The property Nathan purchased was located 40 miles southeast of his original cabin, still remote enough to provide privacy and independence, but close enough to Durango to access schools, medical facilities, and social opportunities for the children. The 20-acre plot included a meadow suitable for building, access to a year-round creek, and enough timber to provide both construction materials and firewood for decades. Construction of their new home became a family project that showcased both Nathan's engineering skills and the children's eagerness to help with any adult activity. Emma appointed herself supervisor of all construction activities, directing her siblings in carrying small tools, organizing hardware, and providing running commentary on the building progress. Grace studied Nathan's blueprints with the intensity of a future architect, asking detailed questions about structural engineering that amazed both parents. Hope sang work songs that she composed to match the rhythm of hammering and sawing, while Thomas showed an early aptitude for mechanical problem-solving that reminded Nathan of his own childhood fascination with how things worked. The house that gradually took shape over 18 months was unlike any conventional family home. Nathan designed it with the security consciousness of his military background, the self-sufficiency requirements of wilderness living, and the practical needs of a family with 4 energetic children. Solar panels and wind generators provided electricity, while a sophisticated water filtration system ensured clean drinking water from the creek. The structure included a workshop for Nathan's carpentry and mechanical projects, a large classroom for Sarah's educational activities, and individual bedrooms for each child as they grew older. Most importantly, the new house included space for visitors and community connections that the mountain cabin had never accommodated. Sarah had begun reaching out to other families in the Durango area, building friendships that would provide social opportunities for the children and support networks for the parents. Dr. Rodriguez, who had maintained her involvement with the family through quarterly visits and regular video consultations, was amazed by the children's development when she conducted their 2-year assessment at the new house. All 4 children demonstrated cognitive and physical development that placed them in advanced ranges for their age group, with particular strengths in problem-solving, creativity, and verbal communication. Their home education program is producing remarkable results, Dr. Rodriguez told Sarah and Nathan after completing her evaluations. Emma shows leadership qualities and spatial reasoning skills that suggest exceptional potential. Grace has the kind of analytical thinking typically associated with much older children. Hope's musical abilities are already beyond what most children achieve by school age, and Thomas demonstrates mechanical aptitude and persistence that indicate he could excel in engineering or technical fields. But the doctor also expressed concerns about the children's social development that echoed Sarah's earlier observations. They work together beautifully as a group, but they've never had to navigate relationships with children outside their family unit. They need exposure to different perspectives, different personalities, and the social challenges that come from interacting with peers who don't share their unique background. The decision to enroll the children in a Montessori preschool program in Durango represented a major transition for the entire family. Nathan had to overcome his ingrained distrust of institutional environments, while Sarah worried about how their children would adjust to structured activities and peer interactions after 2 years of completely individualized attention. The preschool. Director Maria Santos was an experienced educator who specialized in working with gifted children and unique family situations. Her initial assessment of the quadruplets revealed children who were academically advanced but socially inexperienced, intellectually curious but emotionally dependent on family structures. They're going to need careful integration, Maria explained to Sarah and Nathan during their enrollment meeting. These children have capabilities that exceed their chronological age in some areas, but they're inexperienced with group dynamics and authority figures outside their family. Emma's first day at preschool established patterns that would define all 4 children's social development. She immediately assumed leadership of her assigned activity group, organizing her classmates with the same efficiency she used to direct her siblings. When conflicts arose, she attempted to solve them using the collaborative methods that worked at home, becoming frustrated when other children didn't respond to her logical arguments and fair-minded proposals. Grace observed the classroom environment with scientific detachment for several days before beginning to participate in activities. Her analytical approach to new situations served her well in academic tasks, but made it difficult for her to form emotional connections with classmates who operated from more impulsive, less systematic perspectives. Hope adapted most quickly to the social environment, using her musical talents to bridge communication gaps with children who spoke different languages or came from different cultural backgrounds. Her ability to create songs that incorporated everyone's names and interests made her popular with both classmates and teachers. Thomas initially struggled with the transition from home to school, his mechanical problem-solving approach proving less effective for social challenges than physical ones. He gravitated toward building activities and construction toys, finding comfort in tasks that had clear objectives and measurable results. The adjustment period required patience and support from both parents and teachers. Sarah volunteered regularly in the classroom, helping Maria Santos develop strategies for integrating the children into group activities while maintaining their individual strengths. Nathan, despite his discomfort with school environments, attended every parent conference and school event, determined to support his children's social development even when it pushed him beyond his comfort zones. They're learning that the world contains people who think differently than they do, Maria observed after the children had been in the program for 6 months. That's a valuable lesson that they couldn't learn in isolation, no matter how loving and supportive their home environment. The children's reports about their school experiences provided insights into their developing personalities and social skills. Emma talked about teaching other children how to organize games and solve disputes fairly. Grace described discovering that some children preferred emotional responses to logical analysis, a revelation that fascinated her scientific mindset. Hope shared stories about making music with children from different cultures, expanding her musical vocabulary with songs and rhythms from around the world. Thomas found satisfaction in collaborative building projects that required both his technical skills and cooperation with peers who brought different strengths to shared challenges. The preschool experience also introduced the Cross family to other parents who became friends and support networks. Sarah particularly valued relationships with mothers who understood the challenges of raising multiple children, while Nathan gradually overcame his social reluctance through conversations with fathers who shared his interests in outdoor activities and practical skills. I never expected to become part of a community again, Nathan confided to Sarah one evening as they watched their children play with neighborhood friends in their backyard. But these kids have connections that pull us into relationships whether we plan for them or not. The success of the preschool integration gave Sarah and Nathan confidence to expand the children's social experiences through sports teams, music lessons, and community activities. Emma joined a soccer league where her leadership skills translated effectively to team sports. Grace enrolled in a science club that challenged her analytical abilities with age-appropriate experiments and research projects. Hope began piano lessons that built on her natural musical talents, while Thomas participated in a junior robotics program that combined his mechanical interests with collaborative problem-solving. Each new activity required adjustments and learning, experiences for children who were academically gifted but socially inexperienced. But their strong family foundation provided security that allowed them to take risks, make mistakes, and gradually develop the social skills that would serve them throughout their lives. By their 3rd birthday, Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas Cross had evolved from the tiny premature infants born in a mountain blizzard into confident, capable children who combined the security of a loving family with the social skills needed to thrive in the larger world. Their journey from wilderness isolation to community integration demonstrated that strong family bonds could provide the foundation for successful adaptation to any environment. "Look at what we've built," Sarah said to Nathan as they watched. Their children's birthday party, filled with friends from school, neighbors, and the extended community that had welcomed their unconventional family. 4 children who are confident enough to make friends anywhere, strong enough to face any challenge, and secure enough in our love to embrace the whole world. Nathan's response reflected the transformation he had undergone from hermit to father, from isolation to community engagement. They taught us that love isn't something you protect by hiding from the world. It's something you share to make the world better. 5 years after that fateful blizzard night, Sarah Cross stood in the lobby of Denver General Hospital, holding a bronze plaque that would commemorate the extraordinary circumstances of her children's birth. The hospital had decided to establish the Cross Family Neonatal Emergency Center, a specialized unit dedicated to treating premature babies born under unusual circumstances, funded by donations that had poured in from around the world after their story became widely known. Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas, now 5 years old and preparing to start kindergarten, accompanied their parents to the dedication ceremony. The children had grown into remarkable individuals whose early arrival in the world seemed to have instilled them with extraordinary determination and resilience. Emma had developed into a natural leader who organized playground activities with the efficiency of a military commander and the fairness of a Supreme Court justice. Her teachers consistently noted her ability to include every child in group activities, and her instinct for resolving conflicts through negotiation rather than confrontation. Grace had become the family's researcher and problem solver, approaching every question with scientific curiosity and analytical precision. Her room contained collections of rocks, insects, and plants, each meticulously catalogued and studied. She had already expressed interest in becoming a doctor like Dr. Rodriguez, whom she considered a personal hero. Hope's musical talents had flourished beyond anything Sarah and Nathan had imagined possible. She composed songs daily, performed for anyone willing to listen, and had an intuitive understanding of rhythm and melody that amazed her piano teacher. Her music often reflected the emotional states of her family members, earning her the nickname the family thermometer for her ability to sense and express feelings through song. Thomas had inherited Nathan's mechanical aptitude and Sarah's intellectual curiosity, creating inventions that solved practical problems around their house and property. His latest project involved designing a water collection system that would provide drinking water for the wildlife that visited their creek. At 5 years old, he already understood engineering principles that challenged much older children. Dr. Rodriguez, now a close family friend, as well as the children's pediatrician, served as the keynote speaker for the dedication ceremony. Her presentation included medical documentation of the children's remarkable development and their contributions to research on premature infant development in non-traditional environments. The Cross children have taught us that love, stability, and individualized attention can sometimes achieve results that surpass what we accomplish with the most advanced medical technology. Dr. Rodriguez told the assembled crowd of medical professionals, donors, and media representatives. Their development has challenged our assumptions about optimal environments for child rearing and expanded our understanding of resilience in premature infants. The ceremony also honored Nathan's role in the rescue and ongoing care of the children. His transformation from isolated hermit to devoted father had become an inspiration for veterans struggling with civilian readjustment and men hesitant to embrace parental responsibilities. The Veterans Administration had asked him to speak at several conferences about finding purpose through service to others. "I spent 8 years believing that isolation was strength," Nathan told the audience during his remarks. 4 tiny babies taught me that real strength comes from opening your heart to others, even when it means accepting vulnerability and risk. Marcus Webb, the helicopter pilot who had conducted the original rescue, had flown in specifically for the ceremony. His friendship with the Cross family had continued through the years, and he served as an unofficial uncle to the children, teaching them about aviation and taking them on helicopter tours that satisfied their endless curiosity about the world beyond their mountain home. "I've conducted hundreds of rescue missions," Marcus shared during his speech, "but I've never picked up passengers who went on to change so many lives. This family proves that sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us right back." The hospital's decision to name the neonatal center after their family reflected the broader impact their story had created. Donations to the hospital's premature infant program had increased dramatically after media coverage of the children's remarkable development. Medical schools now included their case study in curricula about emergency childbirth and alternative approaches to neonatal care. More significantly, their story had inspired dozens of other families facing challenges with premature births, multiple births, and unconventional family structures. Sarah received letters weekly from parents seeking advice about everything from nursing quadruplets to homeschooling gifted children to building strong family bonds under difficult circumstances. The Cross family had also become advocates for wilderness safety and emergency preparedness. Nathan regularly consulted with search and rescue organizations about improving emergency response in remote areas, while Sarah spoke to women's groups about the importance of prenatal education and emergency childbirth knowledge. "We never intended to become public figures," Sarah reflected during her portion of the ceremony. "We just wanted to raise our children with love and give them the best possible start in life. But if our experience can help other families facing similar challenges, then sharing our story becomes an honor rather than an intrusion." The children themselves had adapted to their unique fame, with the same resilience they brought to every other aspect of their lives. They understood that their birth story was special, but Nathan and Sarah had been careful to ensure they also understood that their value came from who they were as individuals, not from the circumstances of their arrival. "People always want to know if we remember being born in the cabin," Emma had told a reporter earlier that day, displaying the diplomatic skills that made her a natural spokesperson for her siblings. "We don't remember being born, but we remember growing up with parents who love us enough to do anything to keep us safe." The dedication ceremony concluded with the unveiling of the bronze plaque that would hang in the new neonatal center. The inscription read, "Dedicated to the Cross family, Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas, whose courage in entering the world reminded us that miracles happen when love meets determination." After the formal ceremonies ended, the family took a private tour of the neonatal intensive care unit where the children had spent their first weeks of life. The medical equipment that had seemed so overwhelming 5 years earlier now looked familiar and manageable to children who had grown up understanding that technology served people rather than controlling them. "This is where we learn to be strong," Grace observed, studying the incubators with the analytical attention she brought to everything that interested her. "Not just our bodies getting strong, but our family getting strong together." Hope began, humming softly as they walked through the unit, creating a melody that seemed to comfort both the medical staff and the parents of current patients. Her music had that effect wherever they went, bringing peace to stressful situations and reminding people of the beauty that existed even in difficult circumstances. Thomas was fascinated by the monitoring equipment and asked detailed questions about how the machines tracked babies' vital signs. His technical curiosity impressed the nurses, who were accustomed to anxious parents rather than children who wanted to understand how life support systems functioned. Emma appointed herself the family's representative, thanking every staff member they encountered and explaining how much the hospital's care had meant to their family's success. Her natural leadership and genuine gratitude made lasting impressions on everyone they met. The drive home to Durango took them past the old logging road where Sarah's car had broken down 5 years earlier. Nathan pulled over at Sarah's request, and the family hiked the short distance to the abandoned cabin where the children had been born. The structure remained largely unchanged, though time and weather had added new weathering to its already rustic appearance. Inside, the stone fireplace still held traces of the fire that had provided warmth during that long night, and Sarah could easily identify the corner where she had delivered 4 healthy babies against impossible odds. "This is where our family really began," Sarah told her children as they explored the small space. "Not just where you were born, but where your father and I learned that we were meant to be together." Nathan added his own perspective to the impromptu history lesson. "This place taught me that sometimes the most important things in life come to you when you're not looking for them. I thought I was just helping some people in trouble. Instead, I found the family I didn't know I needed." The children absorbed these reflections with the seriousness they brought to all discussions about their origins. They had heard the story many times, but returning to the actual location where it happened gave new weight and reality to their understanding of how extraordinary their beginnings had been. "We should fix up the cabin," Thomas suggested with characteristic problem-solving focus. "Make it nice again so other people who get stuck in storms could use it safely." His siblings immediately embraced the idea, each contributing suggestions for improvements that would make the space more suitable for emergency shelter. Emma proposed organizational systems for supplies, Grace suggested medical equipment that should be included, and Hope wanted to leave musical instruments for people who might need comfort during difficult times. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes me proud to be your father," Nathan told them, already mentally planning the restoration project that would transform the abandoned cabin into a properly equipped emergency shelter. As the sun set, behind the mountains that had witnessed their family's formation, the Cross family stood together in the place where their remarkable journey had begun. 5 years of growth, challenges, and triumphs had brought them full circle to appreciate not just how far they had traveled, but how much love could accomplish when combined with determination and faith in each other. The future stretched ahead, of them filled with new possibilities. Kindergarten for the children, continued advocacy work for Nathan and Sarah, and the ongoing adventure of raising 4 exceptional individuals who had already overcome more challenges than most people faced in a lifetime. But tonight, in the cabin where miracles had happened during a mountain blizzard, they were simply a family, grateful for the extraordinary love that had brought them together and sustained them through every challenge they had faced. 10 years had passed since the Cross family's hospital dedication ceremony, and the restored emergency cabin in the Colorado mountains had become a symbol of hope for countless travelers who found themselves in desperate circumstances. The Cross family emergency shelter now stood as a fully equipped refuge, maintained by a non-profit organization that Nathan and Sarah had established to provide wilderness safety resources throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Emma, Grace, Hope, and Thomas Cross, now 15 years old and high school sophomores, had grown into extraordinary young adults whose early experiences continued to shape their perspectives on life, family, and service to others. Their academic achievements were impressive, but more importantly, they had developed into compassionate individuals who understood that privilege came with responsibility. Emma had been elected student body president for the 2nd consecutive year, her natural leadership skills now refined through years of organizing community service projects and peer mediation programs. She planned to study international relations and law, with dreams of working for organizations that helped families separated by conflict or disaster. Grace had already completed advanced placement courses in biology and chemistry, conducting research projects that had earned recognition from the Colorado Science Fair and the state university system. Her goal was to become a pediatric emergency medicine specialist, following in Dr. Rodriguez's footsteps while focusing specifically on premature infant care in resource-limited settings. Hope's musical talents had evolved into professional-level skills that had earned her scholarships to prestigious summer music programs and invitations to perform with regional orchestras. But her greatest passion remained using music therapy to help children and families cope with medical challenges, a calling she had discovered through volunteer work at Denver General's pediatric ward. Thomas had already filed 3 provisional patents for medical devices he had designed to improve care for premature infants. His inventions included a portable incubator suitable for emergency transport and a monitoring system that could track multiple babies simultaneously using minimal power. Engineering schools across the country were competing to recruit him, impressed by his combination of technical innovation and humanitarian focus. The Cross family's influence extended far beyond their individual achievements. Their story had inspired the creation of emergency childbirth education programs, wilderness rescue training initiatives, and support networks for families with multiple births. The annual Cross Family Conference on Emergency Neonatal Care brought together medical professionals, emergency responders, and families from around the world to share knowledge and resources. Sarah had completed her master's degree in education and now directed a homeschooling cooperative that served families throughout southwestern Colorado. Her educational philosophy, developed through years of raising gifted children in unconventional circumstances, emphasized individualized learning, practical skill development, and community service as essential components of childhood development. Nathan had parlayed his rescue experience into a second career as a wilderness safety consultant and emergency response trainer. His programs taught medical professionals how to provide care in remote locations, while his wilderness survival courses had saved dozens of lives by preparing outdoor enthusiasts for unexpected emergencies. But perhaps their most significant impact came through the Safe Haven Network, a system of emergency shelters they had established throughout the Rocky Mountains. Each shelter was equipped with medical supplies, communication equipment, and detailed instructions for handling various emergency situations, including emergency childbirth procedures. Dr. Rodriguez, now in her 60s but still serving as chief of neonatal intensive care, had become a close family friend whose annual visits to the Cross household were cherished traditions. Her medical assessments of the children had contributed to groundbreaking research on premature infant development, while her mentorship had guided their career choices and academic pursuits. These children have exceeded every prediction I made about their potential, Dr. Rodriguez reflected during her most recent visit. But more importantly, they've retained the compassion and resilience that made their survival possible. They understand that their gifts come with obligations to help others facing similar challenges. The original emergency cabin had become a pilgrimage site of sorts for families whose lives had been touched by premature birth, emergency deliveries, or adoption stories. The guest books Sarah maintained there contained hundreds of entries from visitors who drew inspiration from the Cross family's journey and found hope for their own challenges. Marcus Webb, now retired from active search and rescue duties, had become the unofficial historian of the Cross family story. His book, 4 Heartbeats in the Storm, had become a bestseller that raised additional funds for the family's non-profit work, while inspiring countless readers with its message about the power of human determination and compassion. I've flown thousands of rescue missions, Marcus wrote in his book's conclusion, but only once did I pick up passengers who changed the world. The Cross family proves that sometimes the people we save end up saving everyone else. The children's 15th birthday celebration brought together an extended family that included medical professionals, search and rescue personnel, former patients and their families, and dozens of friends whose lives had been enriched by their connection to the Cross family story. The party took place at their Durango home, now expanded to include a conference center where Sarah held her educational workshops and Nathan conducted his wilderness training programs. The property had evolved into a demonstration site for sustainable living, renewable energy, and emergency preparedness, visited by thousands of people annually who wanted to learn from the family's experiences. 15 years ago today, you four decided to enter the world in the most dramatic way possible, Sarah addressed her children during the birthday celebration. You taught us that love is stronger than fear, that family is more important than convenience, and that extraordinary circumstances often reveal ordinary people's capacity for extraordinary things. Nathan's remarks focused on the future and the legacy his children were already building. You've grown into young adults who understand that privilege means responsibility, that gifts should be shared, and that the best way to honor the help you've received is to help others facing similar challenges. Emma responded on behalf of her siblings with the eloquence that had made her an effective student leader and community advocate. We know our story is unusual, but we also know that every family has challenges that test their love and determination. We hope our experience shows that no situation is hopeless if people care enough to help each other. Grace added her characteristic analytical perspective. The medical research that came from our case has already helped thousands of premature babies receive better care. But the more important lesson is that love and determination can overcome obstacles that seem impossible. Hope expressed her thoughts through music, performing a song she had composed about families who find strength through adversity. Her melody captured both the drama of their origins and the peace they had found through years of growth and service to others. Thomas spoke about the practical applications of their experience, the emergency shelters we've built, the medical devices we've designed, and the training programs we've developed all exist because our family learned that preparation and knowledge can save lives when emergencies happen. The celebration included the announcement of a new initiative that would expand their impact even further. The Cross Family Foundation had received a major grant to establish emergency preparedness centers in rural communities throughout the American West, each equipped with medical supplies, communication systems, and trained volunteers capable of handling various crisis situations. Our goal is to ensure that no family ever faces the kind of isolation and lack of resources that we experienced, Sarah explained to the assembled guests. Every community should have people who know how to help when emergencies happen, and every family should have access to the information and supplies that can save lives. As the formal celebration wound down and guests began departing, the immediate family gathered on their back porch to watch the sunset paint the familiar Colorado mountains in shades of gold and purple. The view reminded them of countless evenings they had spent together, planning for the future and reflecting on how far they had traveled from that night in the mountain cabin. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't found us that morning? Grace asked, using the question-based thinking that characterized her approach to understanding the world. Nathan's response reflected the wisdom he had gained through 15 years of fatherhood and community service. I think about it sometimes, but not with regret or worry. I believe we were meant to find each other, that everything that happened before was preparation for everything that came after. Sarah agreed, adding her own perspective on the journey they had shared. The night you were born, I thought my world was ending. Instead, it was beginning. You four taught me that family isn't about perfect circumstances or ideal conditions. It's about love that's strong enough to overcome any challenge. Emma, now mature enough to understand the full implications of their family's formation, offered her own insights. Maybe the most important thing about our story isn't how unusual it was, but how it shows that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to protect the people they love. Hope began humming the melody she had performed earlier, and gradually her siblings joined in, creating the kind of spontaneous harmony that had characterized their relationship since childhood. Their music drifted across the mountain valley, a sound of contentment and gratitude that seemed to honor both their remarkable journey and the peaceful present they had created together. Thomas, ever practical, had the final word. The best part about having an unusual beginning is that it makes you grateful for everything that comes after. We know how lucky we are to have each other, and we know how important it is to help other families find the same kind of happiness. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky above the Colorado mountains, the Cross family sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the love they had built through years of shared challenges and mutual support. 15 years after, 4 premature babies had entered the world during a mountain blizzard. They had grown into young adults who understood that their extraordinary beginning was just the foundation for lives dedicated to helping others find hope, strength, and family connections that could overcome any obstacle. The future stretched ahead of them, filled with possibilities for continued service, academic achievement, and the ongoing adventure of a family whose love had proven stronger than every challenge they had faced. Their story had become a testament to the power of human determination, the importance of being prepared to help others, and the truth that families formed through love and choice could be just as strong as those created by convention and circumstance. In the restored mountain cabin where their journey had begun, the guest book continued to fill with entries from visitors who found inspiration in their story. And somewhere in those Colorado mountains, other travelers might someday find themselves in desperate need of shelter, medical care, and the kind of hope that comes from knowing that people care enough to prepare for others' emergencies. The Cross family legacy would continue through every life they had touched, every emergency shelter they had built, every family they had inspired to believe that love could overcome any obstacle. 4 heartbeats that had begun during a mountain storm had grown into a symphony of service that would echo through generations of families who understood that the best way to honor the help you've received is to help others find their own paths to safety, love, and hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.